LGB. 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 LGB.
They say LGB everywhere I go. LGB. What it means, I don't know. LGB. Whatever it is. LGB. Come on, help me, please. Please.
Alrighty then.
Thank you. LGB.
That's let's go, Brandon, right?
LGB. This means let's go, Brandon. No. LGB.
Sounds like let's go, Brandon, I guess.
LGB. All right. Let's go, Brandon.
I am Cornholio.
Chant LGB. Right wing and left wing. LGB. Go, you know the thing. LGB. If you don't sing that back. LGB. And you ain't black. LGB. Let's go, Brandon. LGB.
Let's go, Brandon.
LGB.
Let's go, Brandon.
FJB. Let's go, Brandon.
I'm Joe Biden, and I forgot.
Greetings, my dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Reading Epic Threads. I'm your host, Patrick Gunnels, joining you from Houston, Texas, this February 4th, 2024 at 11:05 a.m. Central Standard Time. We have got Angel Paste Rose-Infused Miracle Cream available only at epicthreads.tv. Check it out, epicthreads.tv. Let me share that with you right now. Epicthreads.tv is my new home for all merchandise that I sell, including Angel Paste Miracle Cream. You just go to epicthreads.tv, go to Angel Paste. You can get the unscented and you can get the Rose Angel Paste. You get free shipping if you get $150 or more. So check it out. www.epicthreads.tv. Use promo code Shapiro to pry $1 from my grasping hands, and check this website out more often. We do have merch. We have some of the old challenge coins. We have Kiss the Truth or mugs. We have the Be Epic mug. Also, we have t-shirts, Be Epic, more than one color, a lady's v-neck, a Be Epic unisex t-shirt. Don't forget, we are also going to have other Epic merchandise and Epic new products. We are about to start introducing Epic Artisan Soap. And pretty soon we're going to have, vetted by me and formulated by me, Epic nutritional supplements. So just keep an eye on that. All of these things are coming. Just you wait. All right, we're going to do some Martin Geddes today. And then hopefully we'll be able to get to the latest from Erik Carlson, Purple Revolution. Let's begin. From newsletter.martingeddes.com. An example of an equity argument. To plagiarize. We learn from each other by doing and do more by learning from each other. By Martin Geddes. I am busy preparing for my video hearing with the Traffic Penalty Tribunal on 31st January, which is to defend one of our most previous, I would probably guess, precious liberties, the freedom to travel without let or hindrance. I got the expected stonewalling response to my latest questions on their lawfulness and legitimacy. Quote, the matters of law and procedure that you raise should be made directly to the appeal adjudicator at the hearing of your appeal. I'm wondering if I have a case against the tribunal itself for being constituted to break superior constitutional law and erase civil rights. These legal fights are forcing me to learn combat law. That is to say, not to become a lawyer out of professional interest or career ambition, but instead to oppose communist forces that have infiltrated our country and are endeavoring to trample our every cherished freedom, including the right to life. Equity is the key to overturning these infractions of our freedom by ever-expanding rules from the administrative state. I have found the following 2 articles of considerable interest and educational value on the subject of equity. First, Equity. Law is nothing without equity, and equity is everything even without the law. Equity, in its true and genuine meaning, is the soul and spirit of the law. Second, Earl of Oxford case, conflict between common law and equity. I am sure you can refer me on to more. The volume of videos, articles, books coming my way is overwhelming. I eagerly anticipate the day when these corrupt governments are removed and the courts are refounded on dignity, honesty, and equality. There is enormous wisdom in what the legal system has created over centuries of deliberation, and we must avoid rejecting it as a whole and embracing lawlessness. Below are the notes that I have put together, and I will be using our friend ChatGPT to condense them down to the core issue for actual final presentation. I hope you find them useful in your own battles with greedy and psychopathic officialdom. Interspersed in the text are images from the protest in Glasgow last weekend against their low emissions zone, LES, and low traffic neighborhoods, LTNs. My own car is banned from the road in central Glasgow, despite posing no significant risk to the public. Remember, this is the same state that has killed and maimed the public with COVID, bioweapons, and lockdowns. They do care about our safety, but not in a positive sense. I am Martin, an autonomous, living, breathing man with a soul, the same as the council rep and the adjudicator, attached to the dead legal fiction, Mr. Martin Geddes, that appears on my driving license, DVLA registration, and this adjudication case. Penalty Charge Notice, PCN, is based on the DVLA Vehicle Class N1. The tribunal is asked to adjudicate under the Road User Charging Schemes, Penalty Charges, Adjudication and Enforcement, England, Regulations 2013, Section 10.2, which states, quote, "The adjudicator must conduct the hearing of an appeal in the manner most suitable to the clarification of the issues and generally to the just handling of the proceedings. This is ambiguous as to whether there is a duty to uphold the law in all its forms and the scope of that discretion." Section 3.2b of the Newcastle and Gateshead Clean Air Zone Charging Order 2022 under the Transport Act 2000 specifies relevant vehicles as, quote, "all vehicles of Class L, Class M2, Class M3, Class N1, Class N2, and Class N3," end quote. DVLA classes the vehicle here as N1, which is light goods, having a body style car-derived van. This puts my Ford Escort van on an equal footing with an HGV, but an unequal footing with a Ford Escort saloon, hatchback, or estate. Class M1 vehicles, cars, are not charged, and Newcastle City Council, NCC, claims the authority to treat N1 vehicles differently. The N1 class only reflects the different body style, car-derived van, in comparison to the M1 class car, not the chassis or engine. In contrast, the L, M2, M3, N2, N3 classes all necessitate a difference in chassis and body type compared to an M1 uncharged vehicle. This PCN is legal in its narrowest administrative concern of following the rules, but is it lawful given how M1 and N1 conveyances in private use are being treated differently? Which jurisprudence applies in this case? Is this a legal case, common law, or an equity case? As a purely legislative matter, the controversy to rule on is whether the Class N1 light goods vehicle category obtained by DVLA for vehicle taxation can be converted into a clean air zone compliance category, and whether this is compatible with the Data Protection Act 2018 or results in infringement of legal rights to equal treatment and freedom of travel protected by the Human Rights Act 1998. As an equity case, it is not about controversy. Rather, it represents a serious infringement of protected individual rights and essential civil liberties. NCC lack clean hands, more later, and violate the Nolan principles of public life. It is a clear case of miscategorization to the detriment of personal freedom and thus is unlawful. NCC's case is founded on an untruth and an immoral act. This is tantamount to stealing in biblical terms. It takes what is not yours, based on a falsehood, then does unto another something you would find objectionable if done to yourself. It doesn't matter if Parliament, as legislature, or the Council, as executive, told you to do it. It is still stealing. So, which approach to adjudication prevails? The Earl of Oxford, 1615 case resolved this, and hundreds of years of English jurisprudence affirm that equity takes precedence over common law when they are in collision. The priceless right to travel in an ordinary conveyance of the day trumps the price of the clean air zone. Individual liberty comes before aggregate interest. The adjudicator should consider the whole matter, not merely the minuscule technocratic scope of the clean air zone rules. That's the law. Just does it apply in this tribunal venue? And is it within the scope of the adjudicator's delegated authority as above? Essence of the equity case against the PCN. NCC lack clean hands via classification of a private Ford Escort used solely for social domestic pleasure use as a commercial vehicle necessitates me breaking the law on insurance, which is a false accusation. This lacks honesty and integrity, contrary to Nolan principles. Factually, my car is not commercial in any way in how it is being used. The PCN elevates form above substance, contrary to equity principles, as illustrated by the McVitie's case of a comparable borderline tax in case in tax law. My car-derived van is factually a car, Ford Escort, and its body type is only superficial appearance. The form of my conveyance is not something NCC has an equitable right to regulate. The PCN falsely presumes that a potential affordance for the transport of goods necessitates its actual use for commercial reward. This unfairly penalizes car travelers who have no use for rear seats, but simply value a larger load space for their private domestic use. It denies a liberty of aesthetic and practical choice without a rational basis against equity principles. The PCN unfairly penalizes a traveler without a balancing public interest. There is no specific public health crisis triggered by the volume of a car-derived van and one class in use as everyday conveyance. This results in the destruction of individual liberty to travel freely for no perceptible aggregate gain. This PCN constitutes enrichment, as others in factually equivalent circumstances are not charged. This PCN charges me for the privilege of exercising a choice over the body style of my car, while NCC pays no penalty for trashing my civil rights. This is grossly inequitable. This PCN fails to achieve a fair balance of interests by categorizing what is substantially a car, N1 class, and that can be used for domestic travel the same as the largest and most polluting fleet, HGV vehicle, N3, that cannot. Even if they have different charges, no distinction is made for vehicles that can be used in either a private or commercial modality, unfairly penalizing a minority. M1 cars can be used commercially, yet go uncharged. N3 goods vehicles can't be used for daily shopping. You can drive a compliant car through Newcastle 1,000 times at no charge, but if I go once and don't pay, I risk having my car taken off me by debt collectors. This is again grossly inequitable, given that my car may in practice have no greater emissions and is a travesty of my freedom of locomotion, which takes us to this PCN unfairly conflates certification, compliance, with actual emissions. My conveyance is not certified to Euro 6 level, but that is not evidence of it having emissions beyond that limit. Absence of evidence of compliance to the most recent standard is not evidence of dangerous pollution. My car meets ordinary MOT emissions standards. The burden of proof is on the claimant to demonstrate there is a legitimate public interest in restricting my freedom to travel. This is absent. This PCN lacks fairness in how administrative data is obtained and processed. Notwithstanding the Data Protection Act triggers and GDPR principles, the transmutation of data for road tax into an environmental levy without permission or transparency is unfair. How did a car-derived van become a van and not a car on the DVLA website? Who knows? I also have not given permission for my picture to be taken or data collected by a corporation. This PCN transforms the sacred right of a living man to travel in a private automobile into a privilege that is withheld from select members of the public while granted to others by a corporation. That corporate entity is using duress by the state to force you into associating yourself with a legal fiction under a license, which is personage and coercion. This is against the equity principle of fairness. The limits of the tribunal process for dealing with equity cases. The tribunal format allows no equitable remedy or legal counterclaim for violation of civil rights. The tribunal system is problematic to me as the adjudicator is not under a judicial oath to uphold the law in its widest sense. The adjudicator may be under another oath to the legal profession, creating a conflict of interest. The regulations introduce personal discretion to end run the law. It could be a Marxist adjudicator. The finding is later converted from legal to lawful via statute, via S16 of regulations. This all pushes on boundaries of English constitutional law demanding due process, notably Bill of Rights 1689, as well as ECHR Article 6. In my work on unrelated matters to do with council tax, I have discovered that Halsbury's Laws of England states administrative tribunals are unconstitutional, and LCJ Widgery condemns them as extortion. Such concerns over their lawfulness are not new to CAZs or restricted to myself. Administrative tribunals are a tempting means to bypass superior law. This is not to impugn the honor of those present today. Administrative tribunals are efficient in their execution, but potentially devastating to long-standing liberties, as is the case here. This may require judicial review to resolve. The moral necessity for equity to prevail as the applicable jurisprudence. This inequitable but legalized discrimination has severe consequences for me as owner of a car-derived van as my daily conveyance. First, in this case, I experienced discriminatory treatment in Newcastle for wishing to use a two-seater with handy load space for a normal social journey that would be uncharged if I used an estate car rather than a van car. It is a huge use of my time to defend my civil liberties and right to travel on an equitable basis. Second, I face an effective driving ban by transport for London, 2 miles in car to deliver my brother to the airport, 112.5 pounds without a PCN, but 5,000 miles by NOx-emitting plane, 350 pounds. There was no due process or jury of my peers before this, a fine or forfeit, ditto. I face 112.5 LEZ charge to park at Stanmore near M1 and get tube to healthcare appointments each way. I am prospectively charged to attend a public protest in Glasgow. This is a levy on movement to exercise an essential right. It took 30 minutes of research and still not clear in advance where I can travel. Glasgow Les was implemented without an air quality crisis and out with lawful process. Clean air is not the only public interest objective and not even the only health goal. There is a reasonable suspicion of an entrapment agenda that isn't public health, but rather is expanding political power, installing state surveillance, or seeking commercial gain. A single issue to consider, according to equity, is this PCN fair and reasonable in the circumstances? Quote, law is nothing without equity, and equity is everything, even without the law. John Bouvier, Institutes of American Law, Volume 4, 1854, Section page 100, Section 3724, Paragraph 5. There are secondary matters, signage and consent, data protection and integrity, technical definitions, but I am not interested in exploring these. They fail to address the central matter of principle, which is the limit of parliamentary power to discriminate and hence NCC's power to do the same, as constrained via the rules of equity, constitutional law, and international law. The legislature is not permitted to create privileged or persecuted classes of traveler absent some balancing interest, of which there is none here, as van appearance is not a health hazard. This case hits on foundational law, especially Bill of Rights 1689, as it establishes a grossly unequal treatment that is unconstitutional. Detailed argument as to why M1 and N1 classes must be treated equally. To charge a car-derived van differently from an otherwise identical private car means either the body shape is being directly levied in a way unrelated to emissions, which is illegal, as there's no stylish truck zone legislation in the Transport Act 2000, or its use is deemed not private due to being commercial in nature as secondary characteristic of its shape. If I am operating in commerce, then I must be without valid insurance and breaking the law. Either my insurance company is colluding with me, or I am putting other road users at risk of loss by being uninsured. To infer that I am operating in commerce is to imply that I am a lawbreaker and offender. If that is untrue, then it is dishonorable and contrary to the principles of equity. So, is this a car, i.e. automobile? And is it private? If yes to both, then it is exempt. The McVitie's case answers the van or car issue. My conveyance is a car, a Ford Escort, and that is its substance. That van is only its body type and merely form and appearance. The body plays no part in its emissions, and NCC lacks authority to regulate the body of my car. Is it private? The facts state so. I have traveled over 27,000 miles in it solely as private carriage. It is only insured for social, domestic, and pleasure use. There is no suggestion from NCC that I see, and certainly no evidence that I am carrying goods or using it in the course of business. The burden of proof is on them, as they are making the implied commercial claim. The CAZ is a use-based fee, so should rationally reflect use, since many conveyances can be used privately or in commerce. In this instance, I was taking a friend to the train station to collect lost luggage. I believe NCC has no public interest justification to treat me differently from a traveler in a Ford Escort estate car. As such, there is little adjudicator discretion when framed in equity terms. Final thoughts for the adjudicator. In the camera image is not only a vehicle, but also a living, breathing man with a soul. If you were in my shoes and feel you would be aggrieved by discrimination and make the same case, then you must dismiss this PCN on the grounds of equity. Only the substance of my vehicle is relevant, which makes it a car, and it factually is in private use. Truth is stronger than legislation in law. Parliament cannot legislate a lie into reality. Equity is everything. Thank you for your time and energy as living, breathing men or women. That is the brilliant Martin Geddes. Go to martingeddes.com/support to donate to him. This is what he does for a living. He relies on support from this community to keep doing what he is doing, and what he is doing, in my opinion, is absolutely essential. Also, don't forget to go to epicthreads.tv. That's epicthreads.tv. You can go there for the purpose of getting angel paste, for getting merch. Look at this. epicthreads.tv. Handpicked marketplace by the man who reads Epic Threads. That would be me. So you just click on angel paste, and this is the only place where you can get individual bottles of rose-infused angel paste, which consists only of food-grade plant oils made by my sister at her home in Spring, Texas. Only of food-grade plant oils with 17 drops of unbelievable rose essential oil, fully organic. Everything in here is food-grade, meaning organic, virgin, absolutely incredible. Goes on your skin, and my goodness, is the scent incredible. The gift boxes, they're all done. But, the scent is still available from rose-infused angel paste. Your skin will drink it up. And of course, you could check out my Epic merch. Get my coins, my mugs, my t-shirts, all the mugs and the t-shirts, all designed by my wife, Ashley. All right. Next from Martin Geddes. Okay. We'll do one more of Martin, and then we'll jump to the Purple Revolution from Erik Carlson. Always give errant authority a chance to repent, from newsletter.martingeddes.com. Don't condemn others as dishonorable until they have declined the opportunity. By Martin Geddes. I have a traffic penalty tribunal hearing on Wednesday that addresses fundamental issues of civil liberties and constitutional law. My expectation is that those superior matters will be railroaded, but there are legal, moral, spiritual consequences to becoming an accessory to Parliament's betrayal of the people. Given the gravity of the infringement of essential and inalienable rights, we can never back down. Below is the summary that I plan to read out. The biggie is at the end. These tribunals are unconstitutional and are accessories to extortion. By acting outside any lawful public role, even if for now legal under unconstitutional acts, there is no protection for the adjudicator should those acts be overturned. The honorable course is for the council to withdraw, but in reality, they always stonewall and double down. A message from the adjudicator reads, please note that my role is restricted to considering whether factually the contravention occurred and whether any of the grounds of appeal apply. So whether the adjudication itself is lawful or whether the council is acting lawfully are unlikely to be considered. This narrowing of the grounds for appeal to exclude all superior law is the definition of treason. The whole thing is limited to an absurdly short 30 minutes. Dr. Boehm's case, 1610, is famous case law, which states, for when an act of parliament is against common right or reason or is repugnant, common law will control it. We now assign that role to judicial review, which may be needed in this case as inalienable rights are being infringed, yet there appears to be no statutory weight attached to those rights. I am also the victim of trespass in this situation, yet find myself in the position of appeal, despite never having been tried in a normal court of law. Furthermore, it appears Parliament has designed an adjudication process that exceeds its authority in Bill of Rights 1688, which is to this day primary law resulting from a constitutional convention parliament. Specifically, I am here to defend some fundamental civil rights that include access to healthcare and the right to protest that depend on travel rights. These rights are negatively affected by my right to travel being impaired by clean air zone and low emissions zone discrimination against those who choose a car-derived van as their private conveyance. The loss is not just felt in Newcastle, it also has affected my travel to Glasgow to protest and London for healthcare. This is not an academic exercise, as CAZs and LEZs have profound costs in the real world for those caught up in the unfair rules. I am not in a financial position to buy a newer car for the convenience of administrators, nor should I have to. Something is wrong here at a far deeper level than just the miscategorization of my private conveyance as a van rather than a car for CAZ purposes. Any reasonable person in the pub or on the bus can instantly see there is inequitable treatment in this case that violates a do unto others moral code. Your innate sense of right and wrong should be feeling that there are irregularities here that need to be addressed. This iniquity is due to the driver and vehicle licensing authorities' doubled meaning or ambiguous legal definitions, as cited in reference to my car-derived van and supported by United Biscuits v. Customs and Excise 1991. It should concern you that administrators appear to be applying conflicting rules of classification to the administrated road users. There is no accommodation for the context of lived reality to be taken into account. Instead, fixed and inflexible rules are mechanically applied without mercy. Meanwhile, the health case for CAZs and LEZs remains unproven. Are there limits on the power of the state to erode individual basic freedoms, especially of movement, in the name of collective environmental goals? Can one health objective of clean air be raised above all other matters of public interest and civil rights? Can those environmental rules be enforced through administrative tribunals that, while efficient, lack the usual checks of civil procedure rules or criminal cases acting under judicial oath? There are two fundamental problems here. One is fact. My usual and ordinary conveyance is a 2001 Ford Escort van, which is treated differently from a Ford Escort saloon, estate, or hatchback car. The facts on the ground make the penalty charge notice, PCN, unenforceable, as its substance is a car in private use. The other is law, the abuse of power by raising the lowest level of IT policy, DVLA classification rules, above the highest duties in law, equity, constitution, treaties, without remedy or accountability for said abuse. That makes the PCN unconstitutional, a higher standard with more severe consequence for those who violate civil rights. An act of authority may be based on untruth, as I assert is the case here, by implying that I am operating in commerce without valid insurance. If so, then nothing Parliament or any public body does to dignify a falsehood will make it true. Likewise, obeying orders is not a reason to abandon individual moral agency in legal matters. If you would feel aggrieved in my shoes, then we have a problem of conscience that is bigger than the statutory adjudication. The supplied analysis in my presentation deck shows how the Nolan principles of public life are breached in this case and hints at a serious structural and ethical problem. I am making the limited and narrower case here today that the PCN should be dismissed as a tort against my property rights to deploy my car as I see fit. Regulating its form, not its substance, without a balancing public interest exceeds the authority delegated under statute law. Mere compliance to administrative process is not the same as being legal. The procedural rules were followed to the letter by Newcastle City Council, NCC, but that's not the point. My life does not have to revolve around the limits of DVLA's legacy data and how they have unfairly converted it from road tax to CAZs. Of all my submissions, one brings the central legal matter into focus, which is the matrix of vehicle registration classifications versus use cases, domestic and commercial. The essential points are: 1, my private conveyance is of an ordinary and usual kind for domestic use. I am not perversely going to see an auntie in a JCB. 2, there are distinct property rights from usage rights, which with civil liberties attached to the latter. And 3, that the artificial division of passenger and goods transport for vehicle registration property rights does not cleanly divide into non-commercial and commercial use cases for travel. The overloading of the term vehicle to blur the physical carriage transporter from the conveyance travel service has allowed NCC and others to transform data intended for one purpose, i.e. road tax, into a completely different one, i.e. clean air zone. This conversion is done in a manner that burdens the property right unlawfully, unfairly, harms protected usage rights, and lacks transparency. The presentation material unpacks this in detail. You either find the logic compelling or you do not. There is also a test here to see if mercantile law, through vehicle and driver licensing, has effectively erased our common law and constitutional rights as individual men and women. If the NCC case is that we have consented to be abused, the Miss Whiplash argument, then that is a sad state of affairs. Is the at most trivial trespass of my van to the health of the people of Newcastle really worth this abandonment of our foundational Judeo-Christian beliefs and the resulting trespass against me? As such, the real case is about equity, which arises from us all being equal under the law and that we must not treat others in ways that we ourselves might find distasteful. Equity is a matter that is normally only considered in depth in higher chancery courts. I have documented the equity case in my submission, but do not wish to present it given time constraints. Again, either you find it compelling or you do not. The facts and morals don't change. Section 16 of the regulations, recovery of amounts payable under an adjudication, treats the adjudication as equivalent to that of a county court. This is problematic, as councils can ignore representations made on equity grounds, and tribunals can opt for a narrow interpretation of legality over lawfulness. The result is potentially catastrophic for civil rights and due process. In R. v. Thistlewood, 1820, it was stated that, quote, to destroy the Constitution is treason. A strict observer might consider Parliament to have engaged in this high crime via Section 16. There is a parallel civil rights and due process issue unfolding with respect to council liability orders and administrative tribunals operated by magistrates' courts out with civil procedure rules. The recent High Court ruling in the case of Leighton v. Bristow v. Souter, 2023, alludes to the tribunals aiding councils to break the law, as there is no authority or paperwork for debt collection. This is all at the behest of Parliament that has misinterpreted its own sovereignty as authority to rule over the people rather than act as their agent subject to the constraints of the Bill of Rights. Consequently, many good individuals with honorable intent find themselves in bad systems. Recognizing that the issues here are systemic and not personal, I have made an offer to NCC to provide an affidavit that my conveyance is purely for private use. This reasonable accommodation of their need to administer their flawed rules has been declined. Yet I am afforded no opportunity to make a counterclaim for infringement of my civil rights, whether for damages or for equitable relief. Due process is missing, which breaks the European Commission on Human Rights, Article 6, a problem shared with council tax tribunals. NCC have put the adjudicator into an invidious position in this case. By failing to address perfectly legitimate concerns of lawfulness, civil rights, and equity, they have burdened this tribunal with matters that are extremely contentious. I have no beef with either the claimant's representative nor the adjudicator. Sadly, the only way to resolve civil rights problems for ultra vires acts seems to be personal accountability, yet none here deserve such opprobrium, as it is Parliament who have ignored the Bill of Rights 1689, as well as many non-discrimination undertakings in international law. My invitation is for NCC to withdraw the PCN because ultimately breaking God's law, coveting what is not yours based on false witness, will only harm you yourself. This PCN has been a gift to me, and I thank NCC for it because it has forced me to learn a lot of law and clarify what I stand for. At the mundane level of this specific infringement and penalty, the adjudication outcome is immaterial to me. What matters is that we treat each other in a loving way, which ought to be lawful too. Merely pointing at legislation in order to justify doing wrong to another diminishes us all. Withdrawal of the PCN also relieves the adjudicator of the constitutionally awkward position that has been unfairly imposed by Parliament. There is nothing innately wrong with administrative tribunals rapidly passing highly efficient judgment on purely administrative matters, like a sign being covered in snow, so the PCN is unfair. In this case, Parliament has acted treacherously by allowing an end run of our Constitution to destroy civil liberties without remedy. Asking the adjudicator to expose themselves to legal risk as an accessory is deeply unkind and unjust. The main point here is that you must give them an out and a path back to honor. But if they choose not to take it, well, then I plan to hold those who refuse to turn back fully accountable for their actions. This is essentially me turning the other cheek. If they repent, wonderful. If they do now, then they fully identify with their wrongdoing and deserve what comes to them as a result. The hard thing for me is to put my anger aside as being abused by authority yet again and calmly focus on the outcome. All right. All right. I'm going to move on to the Purple Revolution. We'll get back to Martin Geddes next time. Don't forget to go to martingeddes.com/support to support the work of Martin Geddes. This is what he does for his living. So just remember that. All right. Now for Erik Carlson. But before we do that, don't forget to go to epicthreads.tv, where you can get all the stuff we sell, including the brilliant angel paste, food-grade plant oils only, including the rose essential oil infused angel paste, and epicthreads.tv merchandise. And keep checking back there because we're going to be adding new products. Some of these new products you're not going to be able to get anywhere else in the world. So epicthreads.tv, check it out. All right. This one is entitled Purple Revolution. From badlands.substack.com, Purple Revolution, the U.S. military coup against Trump in 2020, by Erik Carlson. What is a color revolution? According to Wikipedia, color revolution, sometimes colored revolution, is a term used since the early 2000s, primarily to describe a series of often violent protests and accompanying, attempted or successful, changes of government and society that took place in post-Soviet states, particularly Belarus, Georgia, Ukraine, and Kyrgyzstan, and the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. The aim of the color revolutions was to establish Western-style liberal democracy in those countries and eliminate corruption. They were primarily triggered by the election results widely viewed as falsified. The color revolutions were marked by the usage of the internet as a method of communication, as well as a strong role of non-governmental organizations in the protests. If you Google Purple Revolution, you will probably find more information on the musician Prince, than the attempted takedown of our duly elected President Trump. It's funny how that works. My definition of a color revolution is the removal or attempted removal of a duly elected political figure through the use of censorship, propaganda, violence, or election tampering. Once the duly elected official is ousted, the saboteur's puppet takes their place. An example of this was when the CIA and MI6 replaced Iran's leader in 1953 with their puppet, the Shah. Color revolutions are often distinguished, of course, by a color. When Donald Trump won the 2016 election, it is believed by some that a purple revolution went into effect. Immediately after the 2016 election, a group of deep staters vowed to slow down or take down Trump by any means necessary. Some may recall that on November 9th, 2016, 6 days after the election, Bill Clinton wore a purple tie and Hillary Clinton wore a purple shirt under her smart black pantsuit with purple lapels. Her concession speech seemed a strange time to go all twinsies on us and a strange color to choose. On June 3rd, 2020, and please take note to when this happened, former Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee on the FISA application process used during the FBI's Crossfire Hurricane investigation into possible ties between the Trump campaign and Russian officials. Rosenstein wore a purple tie. It also stood out. When Christopher Wray was sworn in as the director of the FBI on Capitol Hill on July 12, 2017, he wore a purple tie. He also wore a purple tie on February 5th, 2020, when he spoke to a congressional committee about election interference. According to the Associated Press, quote, Washington, FBI Director Chris Wray said Wednesday that Russia is engaged in information warfare heading into the 2020 presidential election, though he said law enforcement has not seen ongoing efforts by Russia to target America's election infrastructure. Wray told the House Judiciary Committee that Russia, just as it did in 2016, is relying on a covert social media campaign aimed at dividing American public opinion and sowing discord. That effort, which involves fictional personas, bots, social media postings, and disinformation, may have an election year uptick, but is also a round-the-clock threat that is in some ways harder to combat than an election system hack, Wray said. Quote, unlike a cyber attack on election infrastructure, that kind of effort, disinformation, in a world where we have a First Amendment and believe strongly in freedom of expression, the FBI is not going to be in the business of being the truth police and monitoring disinformation online, Wray said. The FBI and Department of Homeland Security are on alert for election-related cyber activity like what occurred in 2016, when Russians hacked emails belonging to the Democratic campaign of nominee Hillary Clinton and probed local election systems for vulnerabilities. But Wray said Wednesday, quote, I don't think we've seen any ongoing efforts to target election infrastructure like we did in 2016, end quote. Wray said they hadn't detected any evidence of election infrastructure interference heading into the 2020 election. Whew, that's good to know. This late in the game, he was still pushing the hoax that Russia hacked Hillary's emails in 2016. He even had the nerve to say the FBI believes strongly in freedom of expression. The FBI is not going to be in the business of being the truth police and monitoring disinformation online. As we learned 2.5 years later, after Elon Musk bought Twitter, the FBI had 80 agents working full-time at Twitter alone, monitoring and censoring users. One of three things is happening with Wray. Either he is completely clueless as to what goes on underneath him at the FBI, while simultaneously being completely clueless as to what is happening in the real world around him, or he is a major player within the deep state, or he is something of a gray hat being forced to push forward ridiculous and impossible to believe narratives because things needed to play out the way they have to snap people out of their mind control. I believe Trump needed to allow the 2020 election to be stolen, but this doesn't mean Wray was working with Trump. It could be that he was unknowingly being used by Trump. I don't think anyone outside of Trump's inner circle knows for sure at this time. The Summer of Love. We all remember the Summer of Love, not 1967, but rather 2020. The American people were about done with the COVID hysteria and its lockdowns. At this point, many of the double mask wearers were starting to say enough is enough. The deep state had lost its draconian control much faster than they had anticipated. In stepped the BLM and Antifa riots to grab back control through hysteria. America went from being divided by how much they feared or didn't fear COVID to being racially divided. At the time, protests against the lockdowns were considered a super spreader situation and weren't tolerated, but protesting the death of George Floyd, looting, vandalizing, killing people, and burning buildings was considered safe, permissible, and the right thing to do. Somehow the COVID virus knew to stay at home when people were protesting for BLM, and Nikes weren't being stolen from Nike stores. They were being liberated from the corporate plantation owners. In June of 2020, Trump considered deploying federal troops to stop the rioting that was occurring throughout the country. Military leaders seemed to be less than accommodating or supportive of Trump's plan. On June 1st, 2020, Trump announced his plan to possibly use federal troops to end the rioting. On 6/2/2020, former President George W. Bush publicly expressed his support of the quote-unquote protests. On June 3rd, 2020, as I mentioned, Rosenstein appeared before a congressional committee wearing a purple tie. Also on June 3rd, 2020, General Mattis denounced Trump as a threat to the Constitution, and Secretary of Defense Mark Esper publicly opposed Trump's plan to use federal troops to stop the riots. General John Kelly denounced Trump on 6/5, and General Colin Powell did the same on 6/7. Mind you, this all happened within a week. The military leaders with whom Trump had complete power over refused to allow Trump to use federal troops to put an end to the rioting, even though it was within his power as president to use them. In fact, some were calling on the 25th Amendment to remove Trump from office. This was literal mutiny. Some reading this may be thinking, hold on a minute, Q said the military was the only way. Yes. But below is the actual Q post. Q drop number 26 of November 1st, 2017. Think about it logically. The only way is the military, fully controlled. Save and spread. Once 11.3 verifies as first marker, biggest advanced drop on Paul. Did you catch the important nuance? The military is the only way once it is fully controlled. 11.3 signifies 2020 election day to me. In my opinion, Trump didn't have full control over military intelligence until after November 3rd, 2020. 6 days after the election, he fired Mark Esper and replaced him with Chris Miller as Secretary of Defense. The following day, Trump fired Chief of Staff to the Secretary of Defense, Jen Stewart, and replaced her with Kash Patel. On that same day, Undersecretary of Defense for Policy James Anderson was replaced by General Anthony Tata, and Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence Admiral Joseph Kernan was replaced by Ezra Cohen Watnick. Why would Trump choose to make so many moves to military intelligence with only 2 months left in office? Why did they all occur immediately following the 2020 election? If you go on Q alerts and search military, rarely do you find the word military not followed by the word intelligence. A distinction should be made between military and military intelligence. Again, in my opinion, Trump didn't have full control of military intelligence until a week after the 2020 election. He had full control of military intelligence from November 10th to January 20th, just a couple of months. This is when I believe the military was used to collect all the receipts and information that will be used to indict the deep state players. Q drop 4,415. Of June 4th, 2020, 3 days after Trump considered using federal troops to end the riots. Riot, coordination, in select safe zone cities, D, control mayors, allow, staged event, allow, former active, mill brass assertion of unconstitutional threat to constitution, underscore, mutiny. MSN public optics staging underway. Alert readiness severe critical. Q. It appears to me that Q was talking about the military leader's former and active turning on Trump in a potential mutiny. The next day, June 5th, 2020, Q drop number 4424 arrived. 4424 of June 5th, 2020. What happens when the gag order is lifted? Case dismissed. I am not done. Be all you can be. Army strong. They knew they could not destroy America through invasion, infiltration at the highest levels of government, media, science, health, military chain of command. Final level. Q. This is just 4 months before the 2020 election. 40 months after Trump took office. It appears Q is saying the military chain of command has been infiltrated at the highest levels. For the people who took from Q post number 26, 31 months earlier, that the military had been cleaned out and they were in the process of taking care of everything, I would argue that that was yet to come. This post makes it seem like there were still traitors in positions of power in the military all the way up until the 2020 election. As I mentioned earlier, I don't think military intelligence was really cleaned out until a week after the 2020 election. On October 1st, 2020, 1 month before the 2020 election, the head of the NSA, General Paul M. Nakasone, met with General Mark Milley to discuss securing the democratic process. What to make of this? Were Nakasone and Milley working with Trump or against him? According to the Department of Defense IG report on J6, the DoD was the lead agency in charge of J6, not the DOJ. General Milley was in charge of the J6 debacle. Here's the tricky part for me. I believe the 2020 election was stolen, and J6 was staged to look like Trump was trying to incite a government overthrow, but at the same time, I believe Trump knew the election would be stolen and allowed it to happen, just as I believe he knew what was planned for J6 and allowed it to happen. This isn't to say I believe Trump trucked in illegal ballots in the late hours of election night, or that he used election software to switch votes from Trump to Biden, nor do I believe Trump put Fed boys undercover at J6 posing as his supporters while inciting violence. Instead, I believe Trump knew he had to allow the election to be stolen because the deep state had planned to trigger a civil war if Trump won. But I also believe that Trump used the election and J6 as a trap. Remember, Trump cleaned house with his military intelligence just 2 months prior to J6. Q drop number 3596 of November 15th, 2019. What advantages might exist when you know the other side's playbook? Merriam-Webster.com definition of trap. Enjoy the show. Q. I firmly believe that some of the people many view as the bad guys are in fact working with Trump to take down the deep state. Double agents, if you will. I have my guesses on who some of these people are, but there is no way to know for sure who is who until it is finally revealed to us. Milley is one of those guys who is so inept and seemingly incompetent that it's hard to believe he didn't intentionally try to sabotage the Biden administration. From J6 to communicating with China behind Trump's back, to military inclusion wokeness under Biden, to the Taliban taking possession of $850 billion of U.S. military equipment, to the Chinese spy balloon flying over the U.S., to the Russian pipeline demolition. It's hard to believe he wasn't trying to make the Biden administration look like utter fools. I could be wrong about Milley, but I'm open to the possibility he was working for the good guys. It's possible all of Milley's shenanigans the last month Trump was in the White House was to convince Biden's handlers he could be trusted to protect the deep state. Milley did stay on after Biden took office. The question is, was it because he's actually deep state, or did he fool them into believing he is deep state? Milley retired at the end of September 2023. Was his work done? The Israel-Hamas situation occurred 1 week after Milley retired. Is there any significance to this? Who did Trump fire, and who did he not fire? This isn't to say that if Trump didn't fire someone, then it means they are white hats. Some were just left out of the loop. I believe some were fed misinformation to pass on to the deep state, but it should be noted that Trump didn't fire Milley, Wray, or CIA Director Gina Haspel. Whatever happened to Haspel? After the 2020 election, there were rumors she died in a shootout in Ukraine trying to gain access to the election servers. Who put out that story and why? In reality, she is still alive, and she wasn't fired after the election like so many others were, but one could argue that she and the CIA had been left out of the loop since she took over as the director of the CIA. Trump picked Mike Pompeo to be the CIA director early on in his presidency, with Haspel directly under him. When Trump fired Rex Tillerson and made Pompeo Secretary of State, he promoted Haspel to lead the CIA. But at this time, it seems Trump stopped using the CIA for intelligence and decided to start using the DOJ for intelligence going forward. Who was in charge of the DOJ? Bill Barr. Anyone who has read anything I've written before understands I believe the cabal is headquartered in the City of London. This doesn't mean they're all British in heritage, just that they have come together there. Gina Haspel happened to be the CIA station chief in London between 2008 and 2011, and again from 2014 to 2017. Remember that the Russia propaganda came from London in 2016. Haspel now works for a British defense contractor, BAE Systems. Say that again. The former CIA director now works for a foreign defense contractor. Hopefully, people are starting to understand that many in positions of power in the U.S. really work for the benefit of foreign nations. Early on in Trump's presidency, General H.R. McMaster was appointed National Security Advisor by Trump, replacing General Flynn, who the deep state was out to get and was too big of a liability for Trump to have in the Oval Office at the time. McMaster was hired on February 20th, 2017, and was fired 13 months later. During his time as National Security Advisor, McMaster ordered surveillance on Trump's family, as well as Steve Bannon. After J6, McMaster said this of Trump. From the Hill. Quote, "The reasons for yesterday's criminal assault on our Congress and election process are many, but foremost among them is the sad reality that President Trump and other officials have repeatedly compromised our principles in pursuit of a partisan advantage and personal gain," McMaster wrote in a series of tweets Thursday. McMaster continued, quote, "Those who engaged in disinformation and demagoguery in pursuit of self-interest abdicated their responsibility to the American people. It was, in every sense of the phrase, a dereliction of duty," end quote. By the way, both Steve Bannon and General Michael Flynn were fired early on during the Trump administration. Have either had a single bad thing to say about Trump since? Both have spent the past 7 years praising and promoting Trump while being attacked for their allegiance to him, very different from the others Trump fired. It's pretty easy to tell who was placed in the Trump administration to sabotage it and who Trump had to remove to work for him from outside of the administration. What about Erik Prince, the founder of the private military company Blackwater? At first, Prince denied having any role in Trump's transition team, then later admitted to being present at the infamous Don Jr. meeting at Trump Tower in August 2016. Why would the Trump team seek advice from a person in the private military space rather than the U.S. military? Was the U.S. military too compromised? Trump went on to hire Erik Prince's sister, Betsy DeVos, to be the U.S. Secretary of Education. Trump also pardoned 4 former Blackwater employees who were convicted in 2007 of opening fire and killing 17 people in Iraq. Interestingly, once CIA asset Barack Obama took office, Blackwater's contracts with the U.S. government really took a nosedive. I believe Trump inherited a completely compromised military, compromised mostly at the top levels. Obviously, the vast majority of the U.S. military were patriots, but deep state players were put in key positions of power. TV generals, But it wasn't just generals and admirals. Let's not forget about that pudgy-faced little weasel, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, who claimed to overhear Trump on the phone with Zelensky. Remember, this was the phone call that wasn't on speakerphone, but Vindman claimed that he could hear Zelensky on the other line from across the room. It's beyond believable. But it led to an impeachment of Trump before he was acquitted by the Senate. When Trump became POTUS, he couldn't know who all the deep state players were, who he could trust, who he couldn't trust, nor could he fire everyone on day one. Trump could fire people on his staff and in his cabinet very easily, but how could he fire government and military lifers? How could he strip a general of his rank? Trump couldn't fire all the deep staters in the FBI, CIA, and U.S. military, as it would have created a mutiny, which ironically these organizations pulled on him because Trump couldn't strip military leaders of their rank or fire him. The best he could do was remove them from positions within his cabinet and other important roles. The military was an easy way to infiltrate and sabotage Trump's White House. When one of these traitors was placed in the White House, what could the Trump team do? They certainly didn't trust them. They made sure not to share valuable information with them. But until these saboteurs were caught red-handed, they couldn't be evicted from the White House. Imagine how annoyed the Trump team must have been having to walk by Vindman in the White House halls each day. I don't believe Trump really cleaned out military intelligence until a week after the 2020 election. While some viewed Trump's last couple of months in the White House as him being a lame duck, I believe he was hard at work collecting evidence against the deep state. How is it possible that so many military leaders and former military leaders, TV generals, are so anti-Trump, yet so many military grunts and real military leaders support him? How is it possible that so many leaders in the CIA and FBI are so anti-Trump, but field agents and local law enforcement support him? How is it so many former presidents of the United States are so anti-Trump, both Republican and Democrat, unless they are all compromised? One of Trump's main goals as POTUS was to make the U.S. military strong again and to get out of and stay out of wars. Why wouldn't everyone in the U.S. military be on board with this unless the TV generals were promoted and paid to push war to feed the military-industrial complex, unless they were working directly for the deep state? Don't get me wrong. I believe that most of the U.S. military, the FBI, and CIA are patriotic Americans, and I believe the real generals asked Trump to run in 2016, but the list of traitors is pretty long, too. Many of these traitors were injected into Trump's cabinet and found themselves in the White House. Many more are now a part of the Biden administration. When Trump became president, the deep state players were forced to out themselves in an attempt to slow down and eventually keep Trump from running the country. Trump knows their playbook, and equally important, he knows their roster. 2024 will be ripe with attacks on Trump. Cockroaches will come out of the woodwork claiming to have insider information on Trump. People who have been pretending to support Trump will be activated and suddenly turn on him. People will claim they were in Trump's inner circle when in fact no one in that circle trusted them. People will claim Trump treats women badly, mocks his supporters behind closed doors, is dangerous, and is just looking to enrich himself and his family, which is ironic because he's the only president whose net worth went down after taking office. We know all of this will happen. We may not know who will turn on Trump or who will accuse him of wrongdoing, but we know what they will accuse him of. Please, take it all in stride. Understand it's going to occur. Consider it birthing pains, pain that must be endured to receive the gift of life that will come from the struggle. No one can stop what is coming. And yes, the best is yet to come. Absolutely brilliant work from the wonderful Erik Carlson from badlands.substack.com. Also check him out at ericc.substack.com, his personal Substack. He started writing emails to me, which I started reading on Reading Epic Threads, and now he's writing these long-form masterpieces. I can't find fault with anything in that luminous piece. Don't forget to go to epicthreads.tv. That's epicthreads.tv. You can get everything, including the wonderful angel paste, including merch, Epic Threads, and other products soon to come. You're gonna love it, guys. epicthreads.tv. Use promo code Shapiro to pry $1 from my grasping hands. And let us pray. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all evil spirits who prowl about the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. I love you all. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you tomorrow.
I will be the greatest president that God ever created.